Good morning, everybody. I think everyone is in the room at this point, so I don't want to take too much time. We got a lot of stuff to cover for you today. So good morning.
Good
Good to see
morning.
everybody back. Looks like we've got most everyone came back, so that's good. You never really know. It beats the alternative where nobody comes back. So, well, good. We will get started here. Welcome back to A Association Management 101. Hope you had a good first day. I saw some good feedback from the first day. It looked like some folks took some good things out of that, and that is awesome. That's exactly what we're hoping you will do as you attend this session. So let's dive in if you want. We won't waste a lot of time. If you saw the email, and if you didn't, no problem. We're going to cover it here in just a second. If you saw the email that came out yesterday, we had asked you to think about something specifically and maybe in a way that you haven't thought about it before. And that is, well, actually, before we get started there, I forgot to tell you, let's just cover what we're going to do here this morning. We're going to run through the open here in about 10 minutes. Tiffany Shepard is going to come on and talk about operations and finance, all the guts and things, how do you actually get paid? What are the systems like in your association? How do you make that thing run logistically? So that one, we all have a job to go to, but more importantly, how does an association continue to provide for all of the cool things that our members want and expect from our association? We'll take a quick break after that. I have 10 minutes there. We'll see how we're doing on time when we get to that point. So somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes on the break. After that, Liz Icenogle will come on and talk about government affairs. She is one of the absolute best at it, and I'm really excited that she's going to be here to talk to you all about that. In the second presentation. After that, we'll jump back into our small groups, talk about what we learned, a lot like what we did the first day. And so we'll take care of that, and then we'll wrap up for the day. So on that note, let's jump in here. I just started to talk about, we had asked you to think about something in a different way. And what that is to, if you were to actionize what you are for your members and for your other staff, if you were to put your role into a single verb, what would that be, right? We're always asked to tell people what we are. And in my case, I'm the director of marketing for SSH. Well, cool. Well, a lot of times we all complain right after that internally to our peers, right? That, well, yeah, my title says I do one thing, but really I do 50,000 other things too, both for staff and for our members. And so the challenge here was to say, well, what does that look like if you actionize what you do? If you could pick one word that in a verb, what does that do? And so what I'd like you to do is back up in your name, in your display name for Zoom, go back up in there, and in front of your name, pick a verb, one verb that would tell people in an action what you do. And we'll give you just about 30 seconds or so to think that over, and we'll see what comes out of that. While some of you are filling those in, a couple of people already have it. I'm going to pick on some folks here. Amy, I saw you have bridge, which can be a noun or a verb, right? So
it can.
Yes. So talk about why bridge.
Okay. So I'm the director of license mobility, which is it's a new position for AAVSB, but I serve as a bridge, and then I do bridge between our licensees and our member boards, and just work to create the best efficiencies, I guess, or processes for making sure that licensure can happen for our professionals. And so I am being a bridge, but then I'm also bridging the gap. So just
perfect.
Helping everybody get everything done in the easiest way possible.
100%. Yeah, I get it. Awesome. Thank you for that. I'm going to pick out a couple more here. Katarina, you said facilitate. You want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I feel like I facilitate in a variety of different ways, primarily email, but with my team at ACCP, the American College of Clinical Pharmacy, I feel like I'm facilitating with my other project managers, making sure deliverables and timelines are on track, as well as facilitating with faculty to get their projects in on time, or with our members when they're asking different questions about products and services that we offer.
Awesome. Thank you. And then I'm going to do one more here, and everyone else will hold these. So keep these up on your name until the session's over today, because we'll use them later as well. Andrew, you said analyze. You want to expand there?
Sorry, trying to unmute. Yeah, so I do finances and accounting for BEMA, and day-to-day stuff, obviously, but a big part of it is analyzing data and making it in a way that non-financial people can understand it.
Perfect. Thank you. So, like I said, we'll expand on these here later on in our small groups, but the point here is when it comes to what you do and what role you play for an association, right? And how you fit into the entire thing. And this explains all these cogs, right? All of these gears and these things. When we talk about ourselves in title form, if you will, it's very stationary, it's very siloed, it's very piecemeal, right? Like, I'm here, you're over there, we do these things, and it works, right? All these things, you can see how they fit together and you can see how it might work. But if you put them all together, and we do it in an action form, when you open up a watch or you open up a clock, those things aren't all separate, right? They're not all just laying in there and hoping they come together, and maybe they, one piece works over here and does its thing. No, they're all fit together so that when that clock is running, all those pieces are moving, right? And that's the action for me. That is I'm doing what I do, you do what you do, but we constantly know where everyone else is at any other given time, so that when we work together, it's seamless, right? The entire thing's moving together as one unit, so that we perform a function, or the function, which is supporting our members or supporting the mission vision, all those other holistic things that make it sound really cool and Pollyanna what we do for our group, right? So that's the key takeaway here, is in a mindset, and to me it's important for this mindset, is it's not a stationary thing. I'm not just a title, I'm not just this noun or this whatever. I'm an active piece on staff, right? I'm part of this meeting, I'm part of this committee, I'm a staff liaison, I'm also managing up, right? We talked about managing up on our directors or our bosses. I'm managing up, I'm also managing down if you have people who report to you directly. Sometimes you're managing sideways with your peers. Sometimes you're out front with your members. It doesn't matter. You're active all the time. And so for me, it's important that we should stay in that active mindset all the way down to what we do, right? I don't do a title, I do a thing. I'm an active piece. So think about it in an active way. So keep your words up there. Like I said, I want to use that later. So let's do that. That said, we're right on time. And so we're ready to move on to our first presentation of the day. Speaking of operations and finance, I thought that would be a good exercise to get us in the right mindset to hear about the things that we do behind the scenes and how that all works. So introducing Tiffany Shepard, CAE. She is the Deputy Director at AIA Kansas City and has been with the same association for 18 years, which in association world is awesome. At AIA, she wears many hats. It is in charge of accounting and office management. She, not just office management, but and accounting, but continuing education, leadership programming, K through 12 education outreach, and association management, among other things. So all the moving pieces, right? She has served on the Small Staff Associations Committee for ASAE and in various other volunteer positions for KCSAE, including past president of the board. So you've had 3 past presidents now for KCSAE in 3 sessions, which is great. And for fun, she likes to go on Jeep rides with her husband and 2 sons, one who's a freshman in college and the other is a junior in high school. And I will add on here, she is one of the absolute best people on the planet. And your life is better for knowing that she exists, quite frankly. So if you ever have a chance to talk with her on a personal level, you should absolutely take it. So on that note, good morning, Tiffany.
Good morning, Curtis. You are a flatterer this morning. I think he's just trying to be nice because he wanted me to talk today.
That's right. Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. It's really nice to see you all. I'm thrilled to talk to you this morning. And of course, I'm trying to get my little screen share to work. And I always have problems with this part because it never wants to do it right. So we're going to see if we can get it to do it. Okay, let's see if we can do it. Get it to do it right. All right, is it? Which one are you seeing?
There you go. Yep, you're good.
All right, sweet. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about operations and finance, which is near and dear to my heart. It's a big core of what we do at AI Kansas City. And just to tell you a little bit about what we do, we are a local association of approximately 1,200 members for architects in the Kansas City region. Our national chapter is in DC. We are kind of unique in the fact that we straddle the state line, and we have members on both the Missouri and the Kansas side, which seems to be the bane of the existence of my national chapter. We are actually the only chapter in the country who does straddle the state line. So that's always been kind of a challenge, but I kind of have a unique way that we do things because we are a local chapter and there's not a whole lot of those in KCSAE, considering that KCSAE is actually a local chapter also. So I've kind of bond with how we do things. So I'm taking the way that I do this presentation from more of a local way, but you can apply that to either a state or national chapter, depending on what you work for. So I kind of do my presentation that way, but know that this does apply to however, what kind of chapter you work for. Operations. So today on operations, we're going to talk about it in the strategic plan, the operational plan, and then also coming to the budget, which is how you pay for everything that you do. AIA, we have 4 staff members. So in this, we kind of all do everything, which Curtis kind of alluded to. I have my hat and my fingers in pretty much everything that we do. He told you kind of my main areas, but all associations have a strategic plan. And the strategic plan is the goals your association wants to accomplish in the next 3 to 5 years. It is typically set by your board of directors. And you do need to look at both the past and the future when you're doing this. You need to look at your previous plan goals. Did they get accomplished? Do they roll over to the new plan? And I highly, highly recommend using the ASAE Foresight Works Drivers of Change. We actually worked with Hannes Combest and I am just completely blanking now.
Bob London?
Yes, thank you, Bob London from.
I can read your mind. That's a scary place to be, but yes, got it.
Yes. We actually hired them in 2019 to walk us through the whole Foresight Works Drivers of Change with our board. And it was the most fantastic process that we have ever been through. They were able to pare it down to get it to work for our size group and really make our board think about what is coming and what kind of change is coming for the architecture profession in the next 10 to 15 years. And it made our board open their eyes and be like, whoa, like we didn't even think about this kind of thing. And it was absolutely fascinating. And I think was the best exercise that they had ever been through and really, really made our new strategic plan, which just got implemented in 2020, really meaty and probably the best strategic plan that we've ever had in the 18 years that I've been at AIA. So I really encourage you, if you guys are going through a new strategic plan process, to look at that Foresight Works. It is a great thing that ASAE offers, and it will really, I believe, help your board. I know I'm touting this kind of heavy, but I really do believe in it. Out of that, our board came up, and I'm using our strategic plan as a example of what one can look like. We came up with 4 main topics. And one thing I like about what our board did in setting the strategic plan is that they did include the staff and the committee chairs, which I think is really a value because it does bring in a lot of different viewpoints. Because sometimes the board, they set like that big overall thing, but they really do need the opinions of the people who are kind of in the weeds. And so by bringing in those outside views of not only staff and committee chairs, but we also brought in the opinions of people who hadn't been involved in the AIA in a few years, just to see kind of like what their opinion of what we should be focusing on. And I think that's really valuable to do. So we ended up with these great 4 different areas, and then we had sub areas underneath it, and architects are very visual. So we didn't end up with a typical document. We ended up with this lovely visual that they put together with 4 main areas with our subtopics underneath them. And obviously strategic plan can be put together however you would like, but your strat plan is your main area that you're going to focus on, with typically some sub areas so that you know what to focus on underneath it. So our 4 areas, and then we have, you know, like creating a culture of belonging under EDI, which is, I think, is probably a good area that most people are focusing on right now. Sorry, my kids are texting me right now. So those are your big main areas. And then underneath your strategic plan is what we call our operational plan. And those are, how do you accomplish all of those areas of your strategic plan? So it's your working day-to-day plan. And what we have is what we call a dashboard. And these are all carried out by your board, your committee, and your staff. This tells you who's accountable. It has due dates, who is reporting. It's really, really specific. And it's all of your tactics. So this is how we at the AIA do our dashboard. And this is something that we use every month. This is how we report to the board. Everybody fills this out every month. It's the duty of the board members to get in touch with their committee chairs if it happens to be assigned to a committee, and say, hey, how are you doing? What is your progress? So that way the board is constantly aware of where we're at with these tasks in the strategic plan, to see, are we keeping up? What needs to be done? Do they need to be doing something specific in order to make sure something is getting done? It's actually a very, very useful tool. So you can see on here that we have the main overall objective, elevating the value of architects. We have the goals on the left, our action items, who is assigned, and then we're able to fill in the report. It's very useful. And then sometimes we'll put in a due date if there is something specific that we do need to have a due date for. So it's actually really nice. We have been known, and Curtis knows this about me, that I'm kind of a whip snapper, that if somebody's not getting something done, they'll kind of like, okay, Tiffany, you need to like contact them. Yeah. And be like, hey, why aren't you getting this done? We have been known to put like some of this stuff and like highlight their cell in red, and they know if their cell is highlighted in red that they need to get their stuff done. So it's kind of an effective tool to kind of call people out and be like, hey, you're not getting your stuff done. I do actually send this out to our board every month and be like, hey, don't forget to send this. Don't forget to fill this out. It's due by this date, because they are volunteers. They do get busy in their everyday lives. So it's a nice little reminder, but it is a highly effective tool to keep track of where you're at, what you're doing, who's doing what. I highly recommend it. So that's kind of what we do at AIA, at least. I am going to be cruising through this, Curtis. I'm going to tell you that now. This is not going to take me 40 minutes to go through, but
no worries.
That is okay. And actually, I can talk a little bit about operations that Curtis and I talked about earlier. At AIA, we do things a little bit differently, just because we are for staff, that our staff is very, very hands-on, because we are so small. Operations wise, we outsource. The only thing we really outsource is IT. I'm kind of the human resources, but we don't really have a whole lot of human resource needs. We have a human resource manual. We outsource like our healthcare and stuff like that, but IT is outsourced. Everything else is handled internally. Like I said, we're very, very, very hands-on with our staff. We are very hands-on with our committees. We're hands-on with our board. We attend all board meetings. We attend all of our strategic planning stuff. So I know from working at my first experience in association management with GCSAA, if there's any GCSAAers out there, was very, very different. I worked in the education department and it was very siloed. So I know it definitely varies from association to association on how they interact together, but it can vary on how your department does interact with your strategic planning. You could just be involved in one specific area, or you can be involved in the whole thing like we are, because on our strategic plan, I'm in charge of multiple committees that touch actually each of the 4 areas of the strategic plan. So it, like I said, it completely varies on the size of your association and how your operations work. A little bit more in depth about the operations side of AIA, we do lease our own building. We actually do have, it's called for the Center for Architecture and Design. We have our own association management company on the side that we do some association management for 6 other small design associations. So I do accounting for them, and my colleague Kristen does their communications and website work. So we do that on the side, and then we also lease our space out to them, and they're able to call our space home, which is kind of a unique thing that we offer. That has kind of created an interesting little side business for us. And it was really interesting during COVID, where we were not able to offer our space, because that was probably, besides offering our accounting and communications, using our space was their biggest benefit. And obviously we couldn't do that. So that was an interesting thing. Speaking of COVID kind of completely blew up our strategic plan for the year. We weren't able to accomplish probably most of our goals last year. AIA as a local, and KCSAE knows this, we went from doing every single program that we do in person to having to do it digitally. And we have never done that in the 18 years that I've been at AIA. That's the advantage of being, and that's what people want from a local association. They don't want Zoom programs. They want in person. That's what they look to us for. They want networking. They want to see people. So definitely 2020 was probably the most challenging year that we've ever had, but I definitely believe and have heard from our members that we stepped up to the plate and delivered some programs. And I think is make us realize that, number one, we can do it. Number two, that our members do like some of our programs being offered online. We offer typically 20 to 25 what we call universities a year. Complete side note, never ever try to offer a lunch ampersand learn. It's a trademark term, and we got threatened to get sued by that. If you never gotten that letter before in the mail, you can't use lunch and learn, just so you know. So ours are called them universities, but we move those to completely Zoom programs, and our members love them. So moving forward, I think we're gonna, once we're able to move back in person, because our office still is not open completely, we're probably gonna do a hybrid of some person, some in person, some digital. So I think we definitely learned some new things we can do and offer our members programs that are digital and some that are in person, because they are spread all over the metro. And if you live or work down at 135th Street and our office is at 18th and McGee downtown, it's really hard to take off lunch and come downtown for a lunch program, because it's going to take you 2 hours, because it's going to take you 30 minutes to get downtown, an hour for the lunch, and 30 minutes to get back. And a lot of times they're not able to do that. So it's been really interesting for us to learn what we can offer our members online, and what we can offer digital, and what we can offer in person, and how we can do that better. So operationally, I think we've learned a lot of really good lessons over the last year. So COVID has been good and bad for AIA. We are really looking forward to opening back up our office. We're waiting to do that to the 4 of us to get back in person until all of us are vaccinated. We're all on the list, as I'm sure many people are right now. So, but we are ready and willing, and our members are excited. So fingers crossed that we're gonna get back operational sometime this summer. So Next up, financials. So the financials is how you guys stay in business and how you pay for your strategic plan. And when I started at AIA, I knew absolutely nothing about financials. I actually started at AIA as a admin person and applied to be the deputy director after my first year, after the current deputy left, and kind of got thrown into doing this role, knowing absolutely nothing about it except for the little stuff that I did helping out after my first year. So that was kind of exciting, but I absolutely love it now, which is kind of weird because financials tend to scare people. But once you get used to it, it's pretty easy, I think. I will try to keep it pretty simple for you guys. It comes down to a few key items. The first item is your budget, and that is an estimate of your income and expenditures for a set period of time. It's always based on a fiscal year, and a fiscal year is different for everybody. Our fiscal year is the calendar year, and either that or most people run from like a July 1st to a June 30th. Those are the two most typical fiscal years for people. There's accrual versus cash accounting. Accrual is as you get the money, you can accrue it and apply it at different times. So like at AIA, we will get dues money in October and I can put it in my QuickBooks, but I can allocate it we get it in like October of 2020, but I can actually allocate it into 2021 to my budget. Whereas versus cash accounting, you have to account for it when you actually get it in hand. Most associations do accrual accounting, and you always tie your budget to your operational plan. Your revenue is always your money in hand. So you're talking your dues, your programs, and your non-dues revenue. So your non-dues revenue is your advertising, it is your sponsorship, it is anything that is not tied to dues or programs. For us, we also offer, we rent out our space. And we also, like our association management income that I was talking about, that is also non-dues revenue for us. Most associations, and this is also true for AIA, you will find about 40 to 50% of their revenue is strictly from their dues. They always say that you should try to lessen that and try to get more non-dues revenue, but I would like to see an association who actually does that. Cost of goods sold is directly related to putting on your program. So if you have an education program and you're bringing in X number of revenue, then the cost to put on that program, so your space rental, any kind of food and bev, any kind of materials, that is your cost of goods sold. Expenses is your overhead. So your rent, your staff, any kind of business insurance, anything like that is all your overhead. And then once you deduct your cost of goods sold and your expenses from your revenue is your net profit at the end of the day. You can make money in a nonprofit. That some people get really confused about that. Now, nonprofits are able to make a profit. They are just not taxed on that profit. They are taxed on their unrelated business income tax. So for AIA, our unrelated business income tax is income that you make that is not directly related to your overall mission. So for AIA, our advertising income, so we have on our website, we have like little banner ads at the top. They do not, the government does not consider that directly related to our core mission. So we get taxed on that. Also for our association management, revenue, they do not consider that related to our core mission. So we are taxed on that, but that is offset also by your cost of goods sold and your depreciation and things like that. So we actually never pay any taxes. It's all kind of offset. But yes, nonprofits do make money. AIA does make a profit every year. When we budget, we actually budget for a zero balance every year. We don't budget for a profit. And when I do accounting for my other associations, I always recommend to them not to budget for a profit, but this is purely up to your association. Some associations do like to budget for a profit. That profit never goes back to your members. That is not what associations do. It goes back to other programs. A lot of what we'll do is we roll it into our reserve account. Or into doing programs for the next year, but nonprofits do not give their dividend, their leftover money back to their members like a typical for-profit company would do. So this is a condensed version of our budget, just to kind of give you guys an idea. So income would be advertising, our continuing ed, dues money, and dues can be made up, at least for us, is made up of multiple sources. We have our individual dues, which is our bread and butter. We also have member firm dues, which is we have architecture firms who pay us money to advertise their firms on our website. And then what we have is called professional affiliates. And those are those related to the architecture field that are not architects or architecture firms. So think product reps. So they sell tiles or windows, or they're engineering firms or contractors. So we have 3 different levels of dues. We have programs, we have awards. That's our award is our biggest program. We have leadership, a leadership series that we offer. We have our committees. We offer some symposiums, space rental. And then for us, our other biggest income generator is sponsorship. And that is a huge, huge income generator for a lot of associations. We offer sponsorship not only of our chapter as an overall, but we also offer sponsorship of each individual event that we have. So overall in sponsorship every year, we probably bring in, let's see, this year we're at about $100,000 in chapter sponsorship. And then in individual event sponsorship last year, I believe we brought in probably another, well, on a good year, we'll bring in another probably $30,000 to $35,000, depending on what the events are. So we bring in money to cover the costs of our events. We typically do not charge our members for most of our events. The only event that we charge for is our awards for attendance. Other than that, we typically do not charge our members to attend our programming unless it's some kind of like educational symposium. But other than that, we don't charge our members. It's just kind of included in their membership, but that does vary per association. I know a lot of associations like KCSAE, we do charge members to attend things like AM 101 or the monthly luncheons. So that is a revenue generator. Cost of goods sold, you can kind of see on the revenue side, we have a line item called continuing ed programs. So on the cost of goods side, you'll see there's another one called continuing ed. So if there's a revenue under programs, you're going to want to have a matching one for cost of goods sold. That either you're going to want to be making money or you're going to want to have them be a wash. For our committees, we typically always have them just be a wash. We do not expect our committees to make money on their programming. What we call give our money, our committees $500 a year to fund them. Anything above that, we do expect them to either charge members to attend, which they typically don't, or to raise some kind of sponsorship to pay for a program. So like one of our committees had a lecturer coming in last year and they were able to get some of our firms to help pay for the speaker's fee. So things like that. Our symposium, we had to pay for our speaker's fee. And that was something that we actually did pay people to, or charge people to attend because it was a bigger program. And then space rental, we charge people to rent our space. And then on the expense side, you can kind of see what makes up all of our overhead. And so it's kind of everything that you can think of: insurance, computers and equipment, dues costs. And for us, like, dues cost is as little as things of like going to Costco, our Costco membership, to things like my membership to KCSAE and to ASAE, facilities cost, marketing, professional service fees, accounting, things like that. Like I said, we outsource our computer. And for accounting, we I do the bookkeeping. I'm not actually a CPA. We have a CPA that we hire that overlooks my work every quarter and then does our taxes for us. Our salary expense, which is by far our biggest expense every year, which is between that and facility, is usually an association's highest expenses. Our association is really great about encouraging staff development. I think that's really important. Taxes, we always, even though I say we don't pay taxes, we always allocate money every year just in case. Payroll, telephone expense, travel, meals, things like that. So that's kind of how we end up at the bottom with our lovely net profit. Another way you can do your budget, and this is how some associations do it, is they do it by their strategic areas or their goals. So like this one would be broken out per goal. So one of their goals was awareness, and they can allocate like their revenue and their expenses or their staff time per goal, so they're able to keep track of which each one costs. So that is one way to do it. It's not how we do it, so I'm not as familiar with it, but I just wanted to show you guys that that is an option in doing it, and a lot of bigger associations do theirs this way. So every month, well, every quarter at least with us, we give our board a set of financial statements. And you give them, number one is the balance sheet, and that is just an overall statement of the financial position of the association. It shows our assets, our liabilities at a particular point in time. For us, it's always at the end of the quarter, and it shows the business's net worth. The big numbers on the balance sheet is, for us, is our cash value. So it shows the amount in our savings, our checkings, and our reserve account. And most associations have some kind of reserve account, and I do highly recommend that. And I highly recommend that your association have some kind of financial policy. And there's some great examples of financial policies out there. Ours does recommend that we keep 25% of our operating budget in a reserves account. So right now we keep $150,000 in a reserve account for a rainy day. Luckily, we've not touched our reserve account out of necessity in 17 years. I think that the first year that I worked there, they had to touch it once, which has been awesome. So it just kind of sits there, and in case of a rainy day, and even with COVID, we did not have to touch our reserves account, which was really, really awesome. But I do highly recommend that every association does keep a reserve account. I think it's really, really important. And our financial policy is great because it has in there about who does what. You really want to make sure that you have a chain of who does what. I do the financials, but I do not have the authority to sign our checks. That is my CEO. And you want to make sure that you have that division of duty, because you do not want the same person who is signing the checks to have access to the checking account, because that can get really dicey. I've known some associations who've gotten in trouble with people embezzling and things like that. I'm sure you've heard bad stories about that. So you want that chain of custody and those division of duties, and who is signing and who has access to what. So it's really important that you have those kind of policies in play. The profit and loss summarizes the revenues, costs, and expenses incurred during a specific period of time. So the month, the quarter, or the year, and it compares it to the budget, which is really, really helpful for the board to see. I always keep my CEO, my board president, and my treasurer appraised of where we are. And then we always inform the whole board of where we are quarterly. So this is an example of the balance sheet. So like I said, for my board, what they really like to see is where we are in our cash value. So that checking and savings account balance. It's nice to know where your accounts receivable are, because if you have a high accounts receivable balance, you really want to make sure that you're keeping that fairly low. If it's high, you want to make sure that you're getting a hold of those people and making sure that our repayment is typically net 30 days. So making sure that you're keeping on top of those receivable people and make sure that they're paying within that repayment term. We don't have a whole lot of current assets just because we don't own our building. So typical assets, and we don't own anything but our computers because we lease the only thing we lease is our copier. So, but a lot of times those assets would be if you own a building or anything like that. But like I said, that kind of gives you an idea of where you're sitting at. And then this is kind of what our profit and loss statement would look like, and it compares it to the budget. So you know where you're at any current time. For us, our budget, we get all of our revenue typically within the first 3 months of the year. All of our dues are done, renew starting in typically October, and then they come in between October and typically mid-April. So we are very revenue heavy our first part of our year, but our big events are actually in the fall. So you see all of our revenue and our sponsorship all comes in the first 3 months of the year, and all of our big main expenses are in the last part of the year. So our board just knows that like in the beginning of the year, it looks like, woohoo, we are like rolling in the dough, but they know that, you know, come September, October, that's when our big heavy expenses are coming through. So this always gives the board a really good clue as to how we're doing financially. When we set the budget, we typically do not adjust the budget. The board does have the authority to do that. I will caveat saying that this year we are doing things a little bit differently. Last year we kind of kept the budget alone. Once again, COVID blew our budget out of the water last year because we did not. It was really weird. We got all of our revenue in, luckily, before we had to shut down the office last March. And then we moved all of our programming that typically is in person, we moved it online. So our expenses were very small. So we actually ended up having a really good year last year. This year, we are actually predicting to be in the red, which we really don't like to do, but we are doing that with the option to go in and reevaluate and change our budget mid-year, just because we don't know, we couldn't predict what was going to happen with dues, number one. And we don't know when we're going to open back up the office, and we don't know if we're going to be able to do our big ticket events in the fall in person yet or not. So this is going to be one of those years that we're actually going to go in and readjust our budget in the summer. So that is definitely something that the board has the authority to do. And I don't think, like I said, we've never done it before, but I don't think it's going to be a problem. But it is a great guideline to know where you're going, what you're doing, where you should be. And I always like to compare our budget to what the end number is, but you can break out your budget to like what it could be monthly or quarterly. So that's kind of like whatever you like to do. An audit, I know a lot of associations require a yearly audit from a CPA firm. AIA does not. We kind of do like a little mini audit by our accountant at the end of the year. Like I said, she goes through our books and kind of makes sure that I do everything correctly and everything like that. I do recommend doing something like that, but unless your bylaws or something requires that, I don't know that you have to do it, but I do recommend having some kind of CPA do some kind of audit. I think it's always good to make sure that everything's being done, you know, per accounting practices. Ooh, I'm done. Yay.
Cool. Would you mind taking some questions?
I'm always happy to take questions, Curtis. You know this.
Yes. Yeah. I'm well aware. Yeah. On that note, I'll start. Actually, I have one. Operationally, have you ever come across a process that seemed good or even served a really good purpose, but then for whatever reason ended up not being that good in the long term? And if so, how did you help move around that?
Okay, so there's one that always stands up to my mind. So I work for architects, and they are very project driven, right? Like there's very like ways they do things. And I don't know if you guys have ever used Microsoft Project before. I've ever heard of Microsoft Project. So they wanted us to use this Microsoft Project and put all of the way we do things into this Microsoft Project so that we could like, if any of us ever left or whatever or they needed to do something, it could like explain the steps on how we do things, which is well and good. We tried it for like about a year to explain how we do it. And it didn't, what associations do does not translate into how an architecture project is done. And it did not, it did not work well. So it was kind of interesting having then to go back to the board and be like, we tried it because we were asked to. We're like, okay, you know, we tried this, and then we had to go back to the board and like, we're sorry, but this is not an architecture office, and what we do does not translate well into how you run your architecture project. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah, I can vouch actually for our side too. I work with a lot of medical professionals, and so the way they think about running a clinic or running their departments doesn't translate to association management at all.
Right.
And so you have that constant tension actually on procedure, how to go about it. So yeah, sure. I have one other one, then I'd encourage everyone else to ask questions as well. You touched on it, but I'm just curious, maybe aspirationally or holistically, what about the idea that a nonprofit shouldn't make money? Because we hear that a lot, right? That they shouldn't be in the money-making business. What thoughts on that?
So they should, I think they should be. I mean, I think it's fine that they don't, but I don't think that they should be adverse to making money. I mean, I think that when you make money, the way you should look at it is it then goes in to fund more programs for your members. I think you should, nonprofit should always aim for a zero budget. Don't go in there aiming to not make money, because then in the end, that's where you get into trouble hitting that money from your reserves account to pay for programming and to pay for overhead and staff, and you don't want to do that. But if you are making money, then you are able to then put your money back into your members. So maybe that money, we've used that money to pay for a new website. You know, we used money that we made to update our office a few years ago. So I don't want nonprofits to be adverse to making money. I don't want them to think just because you're a nonprofit, you can't make money, because you most definitely can. They just need to get out of the mindset that that money does not get paid directly back to members. You don't be like, oh, you know, this year you don't have to pay dues. That's not what you do with that money. You go back and take that money and do something good for the organization that directly benefits your members. I think holistically, don't be adverse to making money. But like I said, we always make it so we plan not to make money. And when we do, it's great. And then we put the money back into the organization to something that benefits our members.
Right. So I think for me, the takeaway there, the key takeaway is a zero budget isn't not making money. Like it's a different mindset there.
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else have questions?
I just knocked them dead with my knowledge.
You did, well, always.
Or I bored them to death. It was one of the two.
No, that is not an option. Yeah. I'm looking. I actually have one or two more here. Again, from the operational side, if you wouldn't mind talking about staying in a lane, right? You guys hear me say this a lot already. Especially for a young association as they grow, members may be, I'm going to preface this, members may be used to doing a lot of things on their own, right? And so as they grow and they even bring on more staff full time, how should that look? How should an association staff operate as they're basically, how do they navigate that staying in their lanes where maybe it's member driven, but then something becomes operational and should be handled by staff?
That's a great question. So that kind of happened. So when I first started at AIA an eon ago, a lot of stuff was definitely member driven. They had only had 2 staff, I believe, when I first started, and they had a part-time person, and they hired me. So we went to 3, and then after my first year, we went on to 4. So it was a very gentle process, I should say, like kind of a almost a hand holding. Hey, thank you for doing this. So perfect example, like our design awards committee, they had always done everything and kind of staff was very hands off. Well, slowly but surely we assigned a staff person to them, and we're like, hey, you're really busy. You know, we now have the staff person here for your help. Let them take some of this off of your plate, kind of thing. So it was a very gentle, hand holding, gradual handoff, to the point where it honestly did take a couple of years for that to happen in a more what's the word I'm looking for?
Transitioning almost.
Yes, it was a slower transition because they weren't used to it. But it kind of happened in just a very nice, slow process where they didn't feel that like staff was trying to take over, but more they're like, oh yeah, I am busy. Let staff do this. It became the point that like it always with us, and it happened with the board too, that the board used to be very, very hands-on when I first started, like to the point they were telling us what kind of paper to order. Like, and that's not the board's job. And it probably took the first 4 years that I was at AIA that the board finally became more strategic and finally let the staff do what the staff is supposed to be doing with all the operational stuff where they did not need to do it. And it took getting a president in the office to actually be like, let the staff do their job and let us look at the strategic stuff. So a lot of it is also getting the right people in your leadership roles who are all about the big stuff and letting the staff do the operational stuff. So that I think is one of the biggest things, is who your leadership is getting the people who are going to look at the big picture and see the value of staff doing operations and know that that's what they're hired for.
Sure. So final question here. I think to me, then, is it a trust exercise with your staff or with staff and members? You know, the more that they trust you, the more that, you know, that transition is easier. And if that's true, then are there steps you can take to building that trust?
Yeah, I definitely think it has to do with trust. I think it took quite a few years. It took probably 4 years for them to build that trust with us, to show that, you know, we were doing our jobs and that we were doing our jobs well. I don't know that we did any exercises. I think it was just built over time that they, you know, that we showed our competence.
Sure.
That you know, they had somebody that before, at that time, our current staff was there, that they'd had some problems with the staff, unfortunately, before us. So for us, it was showing them that we knew what we were doing. And like I said, I do honestly think it's about getting the right leadership in that has the right mindset. And that luckily, ever since we got that president in at that time, we've had absolutely fantastic leadership that has let staff do what we do well. And, you know, we've taken AIA from when I started at AIA, we had 650 members, and now we've got over 1,200.
Wow.
So I mean, we've doubled the size of our chapter in the time I've been there.
That's because they knew you worked there. That's why they came. Right.
I know, right?
Yeah, right. So, all right. Well,
Hey, Curtis?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Sorry.
I was just, do we have time for one more question?
Absolutely.
So you're the second person that has mentioned Foresight Works. Somebody in our Tuesday session mentioned that, and I was intrigued by it. So I went to the ASAE site, and it was completely overwhelming to me. I had no sense when I looked at that how I could best apply it. And I know that you suggested having someone come and facilitate maybe that discussion with the board, but I was wondering if you could give me a little bit, or us a little bit of assistance on the best way to kind of navigate through that and what it really offers, and maybe just a little more insight on it.
Sure. So, like I said, I had Hannah's combat because she probably was she the one that talked on Tuesday?
Yes, she was.
I had Hannah. So Hannah is the one who got me started. She's the one who hired me into association management. So Hannah is like my mentor, my go-to. She's my dude. I love her. When I first looked at Foresight Works, I was also completely, utterly overwhelmed. It is so daunting. And when I first got into, the best thing I did is I just took it slow and just kind of broke it down into, like, I went through it like 2 or 3 little, I don't even know how many drivers of change there are now. Aren't there,
Well,
like,
it started with 41 and they've added,
how many are there?
yeah, I want to say 10 or 12. They've added more, like a lot.
Have
More.
they? Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
So for me, for AIA, there was some that were obviously not applicable to AIA. And you can probably skim through some of them and realize that there's maybe some that just aren't applicable to your association. And then that the ones, so I was able to narrow it down to there were probably a dozen that were applicable to us. And then I was able to kind of go in those and read through them. And I was able to then, I pass them off to my executive director, and we're like, oh, okay, these kind of seem a bit more applicable to us. And then from there, that's kind of when I then contacted Hannah's to be like, okay, how do I then approach this? Because I didn't know how. I mean, honestly, I couldn't have done it without Hannah's. I'm gonna admit it. I couldn't do it on my own.
Yeah, no, I'll jump in there really quick at the end. No, it is such a fantastic tool / resource to have here, that both Bob and Hannah are local in Kansas City, and that they were part of that original group to put that together, the Foresight Works group. So to have them here locally and to have them both be as available as they are, Mark, if you reach out to them and just say, I need help understanding this, or I would love to sit with you over a lunch or a meeting at some point, chances are, I can't speak 100% for them, but chances are really darn good that they're going to find time to do that with you.
Yeah,
so I would highly recommend that.
They will, because it is they went and actually took special training to be able to come and facilitate and help people do it. So other than that, I would never have been able to get through it. But like I said, there's some you'll be able to determine are just like, no, that doesn't really apply to what we're doing. So, but yeah, it's daunting, but it's fantastic. I mean,
yeah, highly recommend. If you haven't looked at that, Mark, thank you for bringing that up. If you haven't looked at the Foresight Works, absolutely, you should. I will guarantee this. I guarantee there is something in there for you. They did such a comprehensive look at culture in general and how it applies to associations and things that boards should be paying attention to, that you will find something that applies, quite frankly. So I'll make sure we download that, and in the next email, actually the recap from today, I'll make sure that everyone gets a copy of that, because I'm pretty sure at least part of it, at least the prompt, I'll get you that for sure, because I think at least the prompt or the summary is available for public consumption. I can't speak for the whole thing, but I need to look. So I'll get you what I can on that. Tiffany, thank you very much. We're going to wrap up this session. So thank you for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
You are welcome.
All right, folks, I tell you what, instead of 10, we're running just a smidge behind here. So let's do 5 minutes. It's 10:30 on the dot. So let's be back at 10:35 on the dot. Little bio break, fill your coffee cups, and we'll see you in 5 minutes at 10:35.
Curtis, Liz sent us an email and asked us to run her presentation,
Okay.
and she'll just tell us next when she's ready for us to go on to the next slide.
Okay.
know if you want to download and share it since you'll be sharing the other portion, or if you want me to download and share it. It doesn't matter to me either way.
I'm glad you said something because I had shut my email down. Sure, let me look. So she had the same issue. Hey, Liz, are you listening right now? I thought I saw you somewhere.
She was in the waiting room, I know.
Yeah.
You let her in?
I did. It was IAOM. I see it. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know who that is in the waiting room now. Let me see. Because there's an easy fix to this. Because I had to learn it, actually. Are you seeing my email by chance? I'm just curious.
No.
Okay, perfect.
No. I'm going to jump off video real quick because I need to make a real quick phone call before we jump back on, but I'm good with whatever we need to do.
Okay, I'll work with her on that here really quick.
Okay.
All right, bye.
Call has been forwarded to an automatic.
Hello.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button while I was trying to accept your call and the other call that I was on.
I see
Mark?
some folks coming back on.
Yeah.
We are not quite there yet. We're getting Liz set up, so we'll get going here in just a minute.
Okay. Mark, if you've got a second, I was on the programming committee for KCSAE, and next year in October, we're going to have Jay Younger from McKinley and Associates. He's going to be talking about forecasting and trends. And then also in February, so next February, we will be having Hannes and Bob London are going to be leading a panel of of people who have implemented Foresight Works. So it's going to be a panel of people who are at all different levels, like just starting the Foresight work process, maybe in it a few years, and then those that have been doing it for several years.
Gotcha.
So I mean, if that's something that you're interested in, keep a lookout for our list of programming that'll come out. Gosh, Curtis, when does that come out? Must be July, August. We have to have it done by July, but August and then September for sure at the annual meeting. Our list at the very latest of next year will be out, but we tried to put it at a time where it's at the beginning, where people have their current strategic plans done, because we know you can't just come to a 1-hour course and know how to do your strategic plans. But for the next year, it would give you a year to learn about it, speak with your board so that you could implement it then the following year. But
And in most organizations, does it seem that it's being used at the board level or also at the staff level?
at AAVSB, it goes all the way down. Oh, I got to figure out where you just went. It goes all the way down to the staff. We have to do, we create, first the board does it for the organization, then our executive director, Jim Penrod, does his strategic planning, and then it goes down to the director level. Then we work with our staff, and everyone creates strategic priorities that are related to the strategic goals of our association. So
Right.
for us, we're in it quite deep, and it is definitely a passion point for our executive director. But everybody has buy-in, everybody is accountable. The board goes first. Jim is very close after to share his strategic priorities. He's into a lead by example, but strategies, strategic planning, strategic priorities, big deal at AAVSB. There's no one who can't say our mission.
Great. All right. Thank you,
Yeah,
Amy.
sure, absolutely.
All right, I'm gonna jump in here. Liz, I admitted someone in the room under a 16 in 2002. Is that you? Oh, unmute.
Hi, yes it is.
That is. Okay, good.
I'm not sure why I have that odd name. I'll rename myself. What an introduction. Hope everybody-
No problem. Hold on just a second. I will pull up your presentation. I don't know if you got the other email or not.
I wasn't able to adjust. Yeah, so if you guys could drive, that would be great.
No problem. Give me 1 minute. I'm learning all sorts of things about Zoom. So you can actually have multiples up and pull them into different browser windows and then just switch back and forth between specific presentations like that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's kind of neat. All right, so then there's that. We'll just work there, and I will see if I think everyone's back here. So I'm gonna go ahead and give a quick introduction for Liz, and we will get going. All right, Liz Icenogle is a 15-year association professional who has worked on both sides of the aisle, if you will, meaning she has worked within an industry association's government affairs shop, and on the other side as a director of engagement. She'll explain what all of that means. Currently, she serves as a director for component relations for the Construction Specifications Institute. She is an absolute master at understanding how to work all the right channels when it comes to the government and associations game. And we felt she was perfect for this session. In fact, so much so that we made her call in from vacation to present to you all this morning. So hopefully you'll take something out of that. Good morning, Liz. How are you?
Hey, good morning. I'm great. I'm based in Kansas City, but today I'm calling in from the greater Phoenix area. So I'm really glad to be here, guys. I have a lot of coffee and I'm excited to talk to you guys about government affairs. So before we get started, I'll give a little bit of my background, but if you guys could take to the chat, hopefully you guys have been using the chat. I'm interested to know if your job relates to government affairs or if you have a history with it. So I would expect in the chat you could say like new to government affairs or just learning or some understanding or expert levels, something like that. Just so I understand who is out there in terms of your understanding. We typically have a variety of folks who are participating in that way. So while Mark Reichel, trying to understand, So while you guys do that, I'll just give you a little bit more background. As Curtis said, I'm the Director of Component Relations for the Construction Specifications Institute. It is an individual membership association based out of Alexandria. I was hired before the pandemic and am a virtual employee there. And my day-to-day, I don't do government affairs anymore. Maybe that will be my path at a different point, but I have come to the dark side where I am not at all in the government affairs shop. But early on in my career, I spent some time on Capitol Hill. And that's how I ended up in the association space. Was I worked in association government affairs shop for a very large construction association. And they had all the bells and whistles that a big government affairs shop would, including paid lobbyists, consultants, a PAC fund, a soft money fund, and I'll explain what all of those mean. And I did grassroots for them. So in my last association previous to the Construction Specifications Institute, I also helped run some of their government affairs, but they were less focused on government affairs as where I started. So I really have a big history in terms of understanding how government affairs can work within an association. So thanks for using the chat to answer that question. It looks like we have one person, and I'm going to call you out, Jacob Bosch, who's done some state level lobbying. So Jacob, this is like old hat for you to a degree, and everyone else looks like you're pretty brand new to understanding government affairs. So first of all, don't be afraid. Don't let this intimidate you. I help teach the CAE course, study course for government affairs too, and that is sometimes the first time that a lot of association executives, if they haven't been involved with government affairs, encounter it. And more often than not, we hear that people are intimidated by it or just don't understand it. And I would say to you, that's because it's got its own language. It's almost like learning a new language or a new way of thinking, because it's just, it can be very foreign, and it's detailed and complicated. We're not going to get into complicated parts of things today. We're just going to talk about strategy in terms of why your association might consider having a government affairs program. And then hopefully by the end of this, if you have any sort of government affairs efforts, volunteer run or staff led in your association, you'll understand some of the terminology that your colleagues are using or your other volunteers, and understand what they're trying to accomplish. So that's my goal for everyone at the end in 25 minutes or so. But if you have questions about anything as we're going along, I will monitor the chat. So just go ahead and put those in the chat, and we can use those. And Curtis or Ashley, I'm sure you guys can keep me honest too and say, oh, we've got a question. And if it's something that we need to sideline until the discussions for later, I'm sure we can find time for that for the team. So yep, and the next one, why government affairs? Government affairs, first of all, I want to set the stage. Government affairs, advocacy, legislative work, lobbying, those are all terms for this. The end goal, which is to exert influence over public policy issues that matter to an organization's mission. Advocacy is a different way of doing it. Usually government affairs is considered the umbrella side of it, and advocacy is one of the ways that you get to this goal. Lobbyists are part of advocacy. And legislative affairs. So if you'll go back one more, stay there for a second, Curtis. Let's see. So it's associations are in this very unique situation. They are uniquely qualified to speak for and advocate on behalf of an industry in a way that private industry just is not. So I think the ability for an association, whether it's on behalf of industry, so professional membership organizations or individuals, to speak and guide our government, there is no stronger voice, I think, when it comes to exerting public policy than a number of people, organizations coming together to guide our government for their organization's missions. It's I think one of the things that makes associations, well, I should say this a different way. It gives them their special sauce, right? Like it's one of their superpowers is bringing people together to speak on something that's important to them. So we're going to talk about all these items by going over the why, the how, the who, and the what. But just know that every association's needs are different based on what's near and dear to their membership and their organization. And so my hope is that this overview becomes a way for you to put some of the GA puzzle pieces together. I use GA shorthand for government affairs. It's an old habit that I'm trying to break. Curtis, we can go to the next slide. Let's see. Oh, you know what? This is so interesting, right? Like I said, each organization has their own need or reason why they're going to engage in government affairs. And the reasons why they do it can be varied. So it can be that there's something at the federal level, the state level, or the local level that is driving their need to engage. It can be that they just want to create a general awareness of why they're great, why they're important, why their members' work is important. So they don't necessarily have an end action that they're looking for. It could be to educate policymakers on a reason, on the importance of what they're doing. Here's an example. The last organization I worked for, ARMA International, was made up of individual members who work in records and information management, information governance. This is a practice that is like one of those foundational elements to any organization being healthy. But they're unsung heroes, right? Like nobody talks about information governance as a sexy topic unless, you know, presidential candidates' emails go missing, right? Okay, so then all of a sudden people want to know how you're managing your information. But one of the reasons ARMA International had a government affairs program was simply to educate policymakers on the importance of information governance policies. So they felt like they existed to help better society by ensuring that good practices, information governance practices were in place, especially at the government level. So I spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill talking about the importance of government affairs and working in the executive office or on the executive side with like the National Archives and talking about policies and items that the organization think are important. So it was really just education. Or an organization might be seeking to solve a problem or prevent a problem. I was just listening to, if you guys are not familiar, the Association for Association Executives, ASAE, has part of their government affairs outlet is called The Power of A, and they have a podcast. And they are really good at telling the stories of the power of associations. Typically, those stories don't relate to lobbying or government affairs efforts. It's really what associations do to better society. I was recently listening to their podcast, and there's an association, the Household, I'm checking my notes so I get this right, the Household and Commercial Products Association, HCPA. So they represent manufacturers and business owners who deal with household and commercial products. It's been a year for this organization, right? I mean, I know it's been a year for everybody, but they produce chemicals like bleach, their members do. Their members produce cleaning products, their members produce pesticides, their members produce a lot of products. And so as the pandemic really started to come into full view and the businesses were being marked as essential or not, their organization had to work with Homeland Security to ensure that the businesses that they represented were considered to be essential so that they could keep manufacturing things like cleaning supplies, bleach, And more non-obvious things, I thought this was a really great example, is the pesticides. So they're an important part of the food chain, ensuring that they can still produce those things. So they use their government affairs outreach to, at the federal level, advocate for their organizations or for their member organizations to make sure that they could continue to operate. On the same token, they worked with Congress and the EPA to ensure that they could, see, they would always say it a lot better, right? It's harder to do it secondhand. Essentially to free up the supply chain so that their members could produce more product, cleaning supply product in the short term when there was that big demand. So it's not always legislative, it's not always executive level, it can be any combination of things, but the end goal was to allow their members to continue to serve their society and put out their products. So they're seeking to solve the problem. They did it at the federal level, and they did it at the executive and the legislative side of things. Pausing there. Does anybody have questions so far? How's everyone feel? Is this resonating, or is this feeling a little bit hot, too in the weeds? You can go to the chat and tell me.
I think it's too into the weeds. As working at AAVSB, I'm curious as to why, it's probably not an answer or a question specifically for you, but why we aren't more involved in this legislatively. I suppose it's because our members are the state boards, that needs to be more of what a member association would do, like if their members were the licensees. But that's just kind of me thinking out loud and not being able to locate my chat right at the moment on my computer screen.
Thanks for that feedback, Amy. Yeah, it's interesting why organizations choose to engage, but also choose not to engage. And when you're at the regulatory side of things, because that's essentially what I think that your member organizations do, that can get a little tricky in terms of what you're trying to influence. And in a way, you're not a government agency, but there are a lot of things to consider if you were going to do that. So I could imagine a scenario, like a perfect storm scenario, where you guys would want to engage maybe at the federal level, if they're considering legislation that has to do with the way that certifying bodies are managed or regulations related to them. But absent that, there's probably not a huge strategic reason why you guys might do that. But that's just like my, 10-second guess, looking at the strategy. Okay, Curtis, I'm ready to go to the next slide. So people often ask, so what is government affairs? Like, what does that mean? How do you influence policy? How do you actually do it? And here on the screen, I have a number of ways that associations use to get to the influence of the public policy. So you might have heard of grassroots organizations. That would be meaning that you activate a large number of your members to get involved. Or grass tops. That means you might activate a few key superstar, members who have key relationships or have a lot of influence, and they make one call, they make two calls to really good, maybe they know a senator because their son's on the baseball team, or they have a lot, they own a large manufacturing firm in the area. Anyway, grass tops is those key relationships. Grassroots is lots of people. Grass tops are individuals advocating with high quality relationships. You do it by continuous relationship development. You do it by also looking at an issue, a specific issue, targeted issue. You might connect with other associations or other organizations to create a coalition so that you have a very strong voice, to strengthen that voice. or you might get in on the political side of things, on the political action, and create a political action committee. That's where members donate their personal money, not their organization's money, to influence legislation or elect candidates who may serve the organization's platforms. ASAE, I'd like to share an example that kind of highlights how ASAE used a lot of these elements recently for a legislative victory on behalf of associations. So as part of the COVID relief packages that have been coming out, mid 2020, there was a Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP, and essentially that allowed organizations to apply for interest-free loans to help them continue business. And some associations were excluded from the first round of PPPs, Paycheck Protection Program, because of their lobbying efforts and their history. And there was this part of the way the legislation was written that was unclear on how an organization, like what that threshold was. And so when the associations started considering if they could apply, because a lot of associations needed help to keep for continuity, it was unclear if they qualified because of the way the legislation was written. So ASAE went to work and they provided sample language how to fix it so that it would be clear of how associations could qualify. They used grassroots, so they asked members to write in and call their legislators. You have ongoing relationship development with public policymakers, so they were calling those offices and leaning on those relationships. This was a very specific issue that they wanted to have fixed, and they worked with other organizations who were concerned about the the language within that act. And in the end, they were able to tweak the language to make it clearer so that more associations could be served by the PPP. And only because they had that entire infrastructure in place is why that worked. And go to the next one, Curtis. So who of associations can lobby? Can you have a government affairs program? This is a question we get a lot. There are different tax designations for nonprofit organizations and associations. The primary of those are the three that I have on the screen: 501c3, 501c4, and 501c6. Most associations are 501c6, but many associations are also at that C3. Any association of these tax designations can get involved in government affairs. The C3, there are more regulations guiding what they can and cannot do. So if you are a C3, just know that your organization can get into government affairs. It just needs to be very careful in terms of what steps it's taking, and it has to follow certain regulations. So if you are a C3 and if there is government affairs going on, or you guys are getting involved with public policy, you might hear people talking about what they can and can't do. That's why, so that they can, so that the tax status can be maintained. You can go to the next one. So the who is the face of government affairs? And ideal scenario, it's always the member. Ideal scenario puts the member at front. And that can look like grassroots volunteers, committee members, and typically the board leadership. You may also see association staff and hired advisors like lobbyists or consulting firms. But one that people don't often think about is just the association's reputation. So if it's a reputable association, or if the association is known for having a strong group of members, then that also becomes the face of the government affairs. And that's where the communications team, which is like center of Curtis's world, comes in, making sure you have a really good reputation. Curtis, I can go to the next one. when an organization is working through engaging in government affairs, some people often ask, well, what does it look like? You know, who is doing it? And for those with a budget, you usually have staffing that's in-house, and you may have consultants, but you are almost always going to have board of directors or the committee of members guiding what is important for the association strategy. So absent that, it's hard to understand why an organization would get involved. You always want the voice of the member to be center of that, even with guiding what is important and why you should consider engaging and getting involved. There is a lot of strategy. There should be, at least an ideal scenario, a lot of strategy involved with deciding whether or not you're going to engage, and even looking at the strategic planning element. So what's important to your organization? What does it want to be in 3 years and 5 years? Is there legislation that impacts that? Is there some sort of change that needs to be made to allow your organization to reach its goals in serving its members or society? And of course, there's always a budget element. When is there never not a budget element? Other organizations or other parts of the internal team, marketing, membership, events, it really depends on how you're engaging, but it really can, depending on how thorough the government affairs efforts are, touch almost every part of an organization's internal teams. The reason why people do this, or the reason why organizations do this, you know, it's to serve their overall mission, to serve the organization's overall mission. It always comes back to strategy. And along the way, it also provides member value. It strengthens the industry. It gives a voice to members, and can often be used as a way to recruit and retain members. It also gives you prestige. Let me see, I had an example here. I always like to share examples. I hope those are helpful for everybody. Let's see. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce is a really good example, and one that's a very obvious example, I think, or better known example. They have a very heavy lobbying and government affairs program, and organizations join the chamber just because the chamber serves organizations, not individual members, but the organizations join the chamber just so they know that there's an organization that is looking out for their business best interest. And so that is one of the primary ways that the chamber brings in members, is that they advocate at the government level on behalf of those members. Curtis, and go to the next one. I had about 30 minutes to chat with y'all. I think I'm right on the nose. I don't want to put everybody behind. I'm glad to take questions. I know this was a lot. Hopefully it wasn't too in the weeds. I'd love to connect with you guys on LinkedIn too. But what questions do you guys have? Is there anything that I can answer? And Curtis, if you want to take the presentation off, I'm glad to just do the chat part of it.
Sure. I'll start with a question too while we're doing that. How do you start? Like, let's say you don't have a program right now. What would be your, if you had 3 good steps to take, where would you guide someone to start a program like that?
Yeah, so I think the first step is to identify what the needs are of the organization, and then you would walk that back to, does that relate to government affairs? So I could see that happening in 2 different ways within an organization. One, a board member or board says, we need to be involved with government affairs. We need to be at Capitol Hill. You know, let's go do that. And then that's where the really fun association support work comes in, because you can create a strategy. I think you go to your mission, your strategic goals, and say, what you say we need to be there, but what is it specifically that we need to do? And you work backwards, right? Create the strategy, create the goal, and then you would figure out, okay, does that mean that we need to have a staff person on? Or is that something that we could hire a consultant to go and advocate on our behalf? Or you start looking around the association and say, are there other organizations that are doing similar things? Is there a group, a coalition that we could join that is already working through these issues? So I think you would first in that pathway identify the strategic need, what it is, and then look at what the staffing needs are, how do you get there, and then try and fill how you accomplish that. And I think that's where you would start in that scenario. And then there's this other thing, this other scenario that I could see happening, where an association that is not engaging in this way, that doesn't have a government affairs program, is really just existing, something all of a sudden is a threat. Let's use Amy's organization as an example. Well, the organization that Amy works for as an example. Let's say some legislator gets a bee in their bonnet that certifying boards are bad, that they have too much control, that they don't know what they're doing, and that it's inconsistent across state to state, and that really there should be a federal regulation that tells these boards what they can and cannot do to make everything consistent, right? So all of a sudden, the organization that has been existing without really a need to have government affairs, there's a threat, right? Your organization has to respond to that, because your members' livelihood and the way that they do business is all of a sudden could change with a few votes in the House. Nothing works quickly in government ever. Then I think you almost have to put together a SWAT team, right? And you begin to go through those same steps though, but the strategy, the reason why you need to engage is really clear. So then you start to figure out, how do we do it? What's the approach? Now, I would say you hire someone who knows about government affairs to help guide that strategy, whether it's getting your grassroots members together to speak, that would be something you'd have to do, but how you go about it and what's important for them to say and how they say it and how they connect to people, that's all something that someone who has a background in government affairs is going to be able to guide an organization on. So having someone who has some experience in that to guide the next steps is probably the best next step for an organization, so that you don't waste time or money trying to do it yourself. But that can be debated. There's no handbook on how you start that. That can be debated, but that would be my response.
Sure. And then one more question for me really quick. You mentioned grass tops and grassroots and the difference between the two. Is it a case by case basis, or is there in general, is it better to start at the grass tops, figure out who you have and have them work down to build the grassroots better? Or is it better to start at the base level from the roots level and work up to where you start to develop some folks who are capable of being at the grass top level?
That is an entire day seminar, believe it or not, on how you approach that. But overall, know that even though they both have the word grass in them, and that they're both related to using volunteers, strategically they can be approached very differently. So a grassroots system, if you will, is really good to have in place if you need to really put pressure on legislative body or an executive body, so that those elected officials or those government officials know for sure that this is something that an organization cares about. I know that, for example, the Kansas State Teachers Association had to, I think a few years ago, and they probably do this every year, if anyone's with that organization, speak up. But they had to, because of, they had to speak out loudly and persistently throughout the legislative year, so that some of the pieces of legislation that the Kansas State House were considering weren't passed without other, were stopped, were changed. Their goals kind of, I'm not doing a good job of capturing that, but they had to reach out. Okay. So it was really important for them to have that base of lots of people that could loudly and persistently reach out. I would say of the two, it's likely that an organization needs to have grassroots before grass tops. But it really, again, depends on what it is they're trying to accomplish. I'm trying to think of another example here. There's a story, actually, this is a good story. When the healthcare insurance bill was passed in, guys, was that 2010? I think it was 2010. The language was not clear. And that affected the dentist in a very specific way in terms of how they were considered within the legislation. And so they had to go back to Congress to hopefully write the way that the language was written. Basically, they were being treated, their reimbursements were being treated the same as doctors, and because they're dentists, they have slightly different needs, and it affected their members in a very significant way. They used their grassroots, but they also had a member who, a dentist, who had a really good relationship with a senator, knew him, had been building it for years because they had that strategy in place, and he was able to call their office and say, there's something that's affecting me significantly. Can we talk about how to change it? And so all of a sudden you have a one-on-one relationship that got the attention of this one House office or Senate office, but that relationship is what promulgated the actual change in the legislation. It wasn't the grassroots. It wasn't all the people persistently reaching out. It was that one relationship that got the attention of that one person who then started the change.
Great. Other questions? Hearing none. Liz, thank you
Is
so much.
everybody awake?
Yeah, no, it's great. No, it's been great. The information's awesome. This is one of those things that I think, sometimes we think it's beyond arm's length away, even as a staff person, and you find out very quickly that you all have some stake in it, whether you realize it or not when it hits. So super key information here. And I guess the big takeaway for me is, from what I'm hearing today, is that relationships actually matter more than money. Believe it or not, this might be the only time you ever hear that in government. So keep that in mind, everybody. All right, well, we will let you get back to vacation. How about that?
Well, thank you. I hope you guys have a great AM 101 and fun to see everybody, and thanks for participating.
All right, you bet. Take care. All right, folks, we are going to move over to our small group discussions. We're going to do that here in the last 10 minutes or so. We've got a couple of things to cover in there. I hope you found some valuable information in both presentations today. Same format that we did on Tuesday. I'm going to break you out into rooms here in just a second. You'll have a moderator in there, either Ashley, Brad, or myself, depending on which room we end up in. What I want to do is start this by, when you get into the room, the words that you put next to your name. We had a couple of folks share what that meant to them when they started, but I would love for everyone in your group to have a second. So take, 30 seconds or so a piece to just share in the small group why you picked the word you did and what that means. And we'll take the conversation from there. So we'll go about 10 minutes and then we'll come back and wrap up today's session. So hold on just a second and we will get you out to your break room. This looks remarkably like our remarkably the same as our breakout room. It'll be just a minute and everybody will come back.
Nice. Everyone just moved spots though. So we moved around. They should be counting down here before too long. And I know we got about 2 minutes left, so I'll make it quick and we'll bust out of here and get you out on time. Here we come. Okay, I see one, looks like basically everybody's back. So great. We will wrap things up here. Hopefully today between Tiffany's presentation and Liz's presentation, you all were to take some things out of there. That's pretty heavy stuff, right? It's not really top level anymore where we started on Tuesday. It's more about digging into the operations and finance stuff, which is never totally exciting. Sorry for everyone in the room who has to deal with that every day. Speaking as the marketing guy here. Or, you know, dealing with government relations, which also doesn't seem that important or that exciting. But I will say that my experiences with the National Auctioneers Association, who I worked for before where I work now, being involved with our grassroots efforts there totally changed my perspective, and taking part in on, you know, events like Day on the Hill in DC and seeing just how important those meetings are, but how accessible people really are too. And when you're prepared to present an agenda that's worth hearing, how fast things can move in DC when it feels very far away. All of those things have shaped me to where I now actually love working in the political sphere. So on that note, I hope all y'all got something out of today. You'll get a recap the same way we did the other day. You'll get a recap of today, plus a look next week on Monday ahead of Tuesday's session, which takes us to what's happening on Tuesday, which that'll be Ashley, which y'all have seen Ashley on screen here with us the last couple of days. She'll be speaking on membership, diving into different programs, why the membership program is what it is, how important it is, obviously. And then right after that, we'll have Andy Meyer on to talk about marketing and communications. Obviously, my wheelhouse and the one I'm looking forward to as well. So, and then we'll wrap things up next Thursday, and that'll be it for AM 101. So as far as today goes, hope you guys have a great day, have a great weekend, and we will see you all at 9:30 on Tuesday. So take care.